All right, so just in the scientific
Yeah.
world, what is the reputation? What's the safety reputation of GMOs in the science world?
Well, GMOs in general have been looked at as a positive. They've been increasing production. They've been increasing nutritional value of foods. So as a way to end hunger, has a very positive effect. I think that the GMO food itself has not been shown at all to be as a health hazard. The questions have been around how is one producing the GMO foods and what's the hazards in that area. And we don't know as much about that now as we could.
What sort of hazards are feared in that way?
Well, part of it is the way you do GMO or any type of genetic modification. Are you taking genes from the same species, from different species? And what's that type of an effect on the food itself, but also the chemicals that you might need to take a gene out and put something in? I think that in general, though, the food itself has been considered very safe and very helpful. Eating a GMO corn or eating a GMO potato itself is not dangerous. Some people worry about the chemicals you might put onto a GMO corn that then is a residual that you might be consuming because the other plants around that corn are resistant, but the corn itself is not resistant. Therefore, you can spray the corn and you'll be exposed to that type of pesticide. But the data also shows that pesticide use is actually lower on GMO foods.
Is there the feeling sometimes that to really understand the safety, you're going to have more years of experience than we have so far?
Well, we've had lots of years of experience. I mean, a lot of the foods we eat now are already GMO foods now. So we haven't seen a huge upsurge in deaths or cancer rates or things like that in the last 10 or 15 years where we've been eating lots of GMO foods. So we're talking about 40 years, 50 years. Yeah, that's like anything that we do in health or pharmaceuticals. Sometimes we don't find out for a long time, or even any exposure for any chemical that we have. We may not find out for a long time afterwards, and we have to have enough cases to show there's an effect.
But nothing's really appeared that would raise alarms now.
No.
You also see people who say, well, could I get an unexpected allergic response because now the food is not exactly the food that I've had before?
It is interesting with the concerns of gluten-free diets that is very popular in the U.S. now. People are thinking that might have something to do with the type of wheat that we are growing here compared with Europe. But there's no clear evidence that's, statistical evidence that's the reason people are having more secondary effects due to the types of wheat that they're consuming.
Is some of this fear of the unknown and also not really knowing how to interpret the science that's already there?
I think more of it is the fear of the unknown and the sense that we want to be as natural as possible, and we want to keep things that are naturally being grown in the earth up, and those are good foods for us, and they are rich in nutrients, and we're concerned that if once we start playing with the types of foods in a very surgical way with a single gene, it might change that, and we don't know how those changes will go throughout the food system. And some of it is also associated with so there's this idea you want this natural diet. The other piece of this is a lot of these GMO foods, people own the genes, they own that food, and there's a sense that some foods should be not owned by a single company, and should not be owned by a corporation where anyone can use that gene. And then the idea that gene could get out into some other plants. And then there's been some cases where people have used a GMO gene in either purposely or by mistake is getting into their crops, and therefore they're saying you're breaking the law. Now you have a gene that has been patented by another company.
So some pollen from a patented plant drifts onto a field where a regular plant has been grown,
Yes.
mixes in, and now the company goes after you for patent infringement?
Yes, and there's that fear. That doesn't mean that it will happen, but in Arizona we have a huge history of indigenous foods that are very well suited for our environment, and we might be concerned that some of those foods might get changed because of contamination.
And there's no going back when that happens?
Well, it's hard. It's sort of like buffalo weed and other problems we have in Arizona when you have these invasive plants, it can happen. You had to get rid of those seeds, you had to get rid of those plants, you could figure out only which plants are the right ones. You may not even notice that for several generations of a crop even, that you actually have that gene.
So would you say that you think these are overall a good thing, bad thing, neutral?
I think that GMOs have a great potential to increase food production and to increase the nutritional value of food if done in the right way and for the right purposes. It's one thing to create a GMO food so it can be shipped better from California to New York compared to creating a GMO food where the purpose isn't how to ship it better, but how to make sure that it has more vitamins and minerals in it. So it's all about the purpose of why you're creating that food.
Has it been well handled so far, you think?
I don't know enough about some of the staple crops like corn and wheat, but I do know with the horticultural crops of fruits and vegetables, there are some great advances in that, especially what we've seen in Africa. We've seen orange-fleshed sweet potatoes increasing vitamin A status. We've seen yellow corn, orange maize, that has a lot more beta-carotene in it, that is also improving vitamin A status. We're seeing some plants that are more efficient at absorbing zinc from the soil to prevent zinc deficiency in populations. And these are deficiencies that lead to increased deaths due to diarrhea, from respiratory infections. So by getting more micronutrients into the foods, it really is a way to improve the nutritional status of children. And by increasing the value of that plant, the farmers can then get a better price for that plant. It can even be a way to decrease poverty in some places.
What do you think it'll take to reduce all the fears and anxiety surrounding?
I think it takes good public relations and honest public relations between those manufacturers of GMO foods with the communities to show what the positives are, and then to be honest about when there's problems. You know, I think that type of relationship is really important, because if you want to get the positives out of something, you have to be able to explain these were the mistakes that we made and be upfront with that, and then try to get onto the right track. I'm hoping in the case of Tucson and with Monsanto that they build those community relationships, and that we have a chance to influence a company with our values in Tucson to say this is what we think is important to preserve, and then maybe they get on different business plans to say, oh, this is what we should be doing research in, and instead of just what they're currently doing, they can add new values to their research that can actually be brought up by the community. If you could ask community members, what do you want to see in foods? How do you want to improve production? And they say, oh, these are our questions, then maybe telling these companies this is what we want, then they can respond. What I have found is companies can respond very quickly to consumer demand.
I think that's probably going to do it. I'm going to apologize in advance. The paring down is going to have to happen. Anything you feel like you want to add, though?
No, I think it's very good that the county has created this Agricultural Science Advisory Committee to have good communications with the Monsanto company. This will provide a little bit more transparency to what they are doing, because we'll be able to explain what we know and what we don't know. And also having them create some community panels will be very important. But these results of these panels and these discussions need to be transparent.
And this is an opportunity for Monsanto and this community.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a chance for us to maybe to be the location where we helped create a plant that is maybe better, how do I say, we could help create a plant that can maybe respond to climate change better, right? Droughts better. What plants do we have that can be adapted to the environment better? And this is something that Monsanto works on. And if this is an area where we have to be concerned about that, because we see climate change affecting our water supply in Arizona. So we have to think about how do we get crops that are more drought resistant than we had before.
But I was also thinking about, in terms of opportunity, if this community outreach that Monsanto is saying it's going to agree to, that might be an opportunity to change this whole back and forth argument in a positive way.
Yes, and it has to be both ways. The community have to be able to respond and say these are our needs and think that it's going to be honest on their side too. And they can't be as what do I say? They had to be as helpful as they can with Monsanto, as Monsanto has to respond to the community. So that this panel has to be looking in the positives and not just saying these are always the problems that are going on. So it's very possible that the community can have a positive impact on Monsanto, and Monsanto has to take advantage of that opportunity.